Edward Thomas T. Wu was born 27th February 1935. On the evening of 28th April 1955, a cold and hungry Edward T. Wu broke into the house of Florence Smith, a 75-year-old widow, with the intention of robbing her. Smith, who was in bed, heard him break in and turned on the light. Wu attacked her, fracturing her skull, breaking her jaw and nose, knocking out her dentures and breaking the hyoid bone in her throat. She died rapidly from asphyxiation. In a statement to the police after his arrest on the 12th of May, Wu admitted killing Smith. He knew she was dead when he left the property. He had covered her up before washing the blood off his hands and making himself something to eat. He had not meant to kill her. I only intended to knock her unconscious so that I could look the place over. I must have hit her once too often. The defense took a similar line at his trial, which began on 25th July and lasted for 3 days. But it took the jury just 35 minutes to convict him of murder. They gave no recommendation for mercy, and he was sentenced to death. Many questioned whether the death penalty was appropriate for Wu because of his underprivileged background and childlike mental state. But his execution went ahead at Mount Eden Prison at 6:59 p.m. on 18 August 1955. A justice of the peace, several reporters, a priest, doctor, and selected police and prison staff bore witness. He was to be the fourth from last person executed in New Zealand. The murder of Amasa Sprag. On a frigid day in 1843, Amasa Sprag, a wealthy Yankee mill owner, left his mansion in Cranston to check on his cattle. On the way, he was accosted and beaten beyond recognition, and his lifeless body was left face down in the snow. Amasa Sprag was born on April 10, 1798, in Rhode Island, USA. The Sprague family arrived in America in 1628, and by the early 1800s, they pretty much controlled everything in their sphere of influence in Rhode Island. With former Governor William Sprague serving as a U.S. Senator and other family members holding seats on the Cranston Town Council and in the state legislature, the Spragues were in charge of the local political structure. As the owners of several mills, including the A&W Sprague Mill in Cranston, they controlled the local economy. And as owners of several mill villages that included many duplex-style homes that housed the mill workers, a place of worship, and a mill store with inflated prices, they controlled all things social. Because the mill owners paid their employees with scrip that could be used only for the payment of rent and the purchase of goods from the mill store, their employees, primarily Irish Catholics, were held hostage to the mill and its owners. Most of their monthly salary would be spent at the store for food and supplies and on rent, long before payday arrived, ensuring that the employees were forever in debt to the mill owners. Nicholas Gordon, on the other side, came to America in 1836 to escape the coming famine and other social and economic hardships of life in Ireland, then a colony of England. He was also able to escape the burden of life as a mill worker once he arrived in this country. Rather than apply for work in the mill, as many of his countrymen had, he opened a store in rented quarters in Knightsville until he was able to afford to purchase a piece of land on which he built a store with a second-floor apartment in Spragueville, just a few yards up the road from the Sprague Mill. Around the same time, he purchased a handgun and a rifle for hunting purposes and as a means of protection against intruders at his home and store. In 1840, Nicholas Gordon applied for and received a license to sell alcohol by the bottle in his store, and his business was brisk. He knew, however, that selling alcohol by the glass would be much more lucrative. To that end, he applied for and received a tavern license. His business was so good that he was able to pay for passage of his entire family to join him here in America. His mother, Ellen, his sister, Margaret, his brothers, John, Robert, and William's 7-year-old daughter, Margaret, arrived on June 19, 1843, in what had to be a most joyous reunion. His mother burst with pride at what her oldest son had accomplished, and the others could barely control their excitement at being able to start a new life in the land of abundance and opportunity. The sweet smell of Nicholas's success, however, would soon begin to sour. Amasa Sprag, meanwhile, grew tired of his Irish employees drinking before and during working hours. They were arriving to work late, or worse, drunk. Productivity in the mill was slipping, and work-related accidents were increasing, and Sprague blamed Gordon. Amasa Sprag made a move to take away Gordon's liquor license, and because he was a former town councilman, he was able to achieve his goal without much fanfare in July 1843. Gordon, however, was confused. He hadn't been selling alcohol to the mill workers and believed that another store owner, Job Wilbur, who didn't even have a license to sell alcohol, was providing the drinks to the mill workers illegally. It didn't matter. In just minutes, Gordon, who had just taken on the full financial responsibility of his entire family, lost a significant amount of his income. He was upset, and some witnesses said that they heard him threaten Amasa Sprag. Just a few months later, on December 31st, 1843, Amasa Sprag left his mansion to check on the furnace at his mill and then on his livestock on a farm near the Johnston-Cranston town line. Before he could do so, however, he was attacked and brutally murdered just after crossing the string bridge over the Pocasset River that connected the two towns. Shot and beaten beyond recognition, his body was discovered a few hours later by one of Sprague's employees who was on his way home from work at the mansion. Despite having worked for Sprague for a number of years, he didn't even recognize that the victim was his boss. Immediately, speculation grew that Nicholas Gordon had killed Amasa Sprag. The Providence Journal ran adverse stories against the Gordon family, and Nicholas was arrested the next day, even before a single shred of evidence had been found. The day following Nicholas's arrest, John, William, Robert, and Ellen were arrested along with their close family friend, Michael O'Brien. Even the family dog was taken into custody so as to try to match its paw prints with paw prints found in the snow at the scene of the crime. A bungled investigation resulted in the indictment of Nicholas, John, and William. A corrupt trial produced the desired result. John Gordon was found guilty and sentenced to hang on Valentine's Day, 1845, in the yard of the state prison, which was located on the very spot of the Providence Place Mall. Despite the discovery of new evidence that might exonerate John, a new trial was denied. The state legislature even refused to postpone his execution until after the second trial of Nicholas could be held, despite the prospect that at this trial, perjured witnesses could be exposed and exculpatory evidence could be presented. In the end, 29-year-old John Gordon was blindfolded with a handkerchief supplied by his mother and executed following a very emotional final statement. The corrupt nature of the investigation and trial exposed society's bigotry and hatred. That exposure resulted in the state's abolition of the death penalty in 1852, just 7 years later. The action made Rhode Island the first state in the country to abolish capital punishment for all crimes. And then, on June 29, 2011, in the ceremony held in the same room in which John Gordon was found guilty, the last man executed in the state was pardoned. Governor Lincoln Chafee signed a bill of pardon that was initiated in the Rhode Island General Assembly by Representative Peter F. Martin and Senator Michael J. McCaffrey several months earlier. Despite an entire family being destroyed personally and economically, and an entire ethnic group losing faith in a judicial system intended to provide justice, the Gordon family name was finally cleared. Carl Emil Malan's horrific murder. Carl Emil Malan was born in Espoo on January 16, 1872. He was the illegitimate son of Helena Gustava Malan, who worked as a maid on a small farm in the Lannis district. As an adult, Malan found employment on a small farm situated in Simila, within the village of Clacara, in the southern part of the Nurmijärvi municipality. Malan was utterly captivated by Edla, the charming daughter of a local sharecropper. Their romance blossomed as they spent countless afternoons together, wandering through the fields and sharing dreams under the vast open sky. With each passing day, Malan grew more convinced that he had found his soulmate in Edla. As their bond deepened, Malan felt a surge of hope and anticipation. He decided to take a significant step and propose to her, believing they could build a beautiful life together. With a heart brimming with love, he asked Edla to be his wife, envisioning a future filled with shared joys and adventures. However, Edla gently declined his proposal, expressing her desire to pursue her own dreams and explore the world beyond their village. This unexpected rejection shattered Malan's hopes, igniting a tempest of emotions within him. Consumed by anger and despair, he lost control of his senses. In a fit of rage, he committed an unspeakable act of violence, taking the lives of everyone on the croft with an axe. Among the victims were 3 women and 2 innocent children who had never done him any harm. The night before the murder, he had gone to bed with a sense of normalcy, but deep down, he had already resolved to kill everyone on the farm. At 2 o'clock in the morning, he awoke and began his horrific spree. His first victim was Edla Emilia, who had rejected his proposal. Next, he turned to Anna Rosengren, who was also in the same room as Edla. Afterward, he moved to another chamber where he murdered 4 workers. After completing his gruesome act, he fled and concealed himself in the woods surrounding the Lannis farm in Espoo, remaining there for several days. The night following the murder, he even attempted to approach a nearby farm to find food. During many cold nights, he had to rely on a campfire for warmth. In his own words, he claimed he had eaten no more than half a loaf of bread that week. On Tuesday morning, a 60-year-old farmer stepped out of his barn to collect hay. He spotted a man lying down with his head raised and recognized him as the murderer. Malan noticed the old man and followed him, complaining of hunger and shivering from the cold. Sensing some suspicion, the farmer decided to leave. Later that day, a search party consisting of 10 individuals, including 8 policemen, was dispatched to find him. They searched the barn but found no knife. As they approached from the east, they noticed a fire on the hillside. There, Malan was sitting, warming himself and watching the approaching group with indifference. Unconcerned, he allowed himself to be arrested. Malan was sentenced to life imprisonment by the Turku Court of Appeal. His case inspired a broadside ballad, leading to Nurmijärvi Parish becoming popularly known as Murder Lake. He served 13 years of his sentence before being pardoned by Nicholas II in 1912. The subsequent events of Malan's life are largely unknown. He passed away from a long-term illness in 1944 at the age of 72 in Ripila, Vantaa. Malan is remembered as one of the most notorious axe murderers in Finnish history. Death of Katrien de Kuiper. Katrien de Kuiper was born on April 29, 1976 in Antwerp, Belgium. Katrien disappeared in Antwerp. 6 months later, her body was discovered in the port of Antwerp. What happened to her? On the evening of her disappearance, she visited her boyfriend in the city. She called her parents at 9:30 and told them she would take the bus home. Normally, her boyfriend walked her to the bus stop, but since it was raining very hard, she told him she would walk alone. She missed the bus apparently because, at 10:45, she was last seen at a bar, Café Le Routier, on the Iserlaan in Antwerp, about a mile from her boyfriend's house. The bar owner confirmed she came in, seeking shelter from the pouring rain, and asked to use the phone. She made a phone call and left shortly after. To this day, the phone call is untraceable. For 6 months, no trace of her is found until her naked body is discovered by a construction worker during digging near the port of Antwerp on June 22nd of 1992. Her autopsy revealed that she was murdered shortly after her disappearance. There is no information to be found on whether or not she was sexually abused. The body was severely decomposed, and she could only be identified by her dental records. Over the years, the police have followed many strange leads, but the case remains unsolved. Shortly after the discovery of her body, a local magazine called Blick received an anonymous letter on July 15, 1992. The writer claims to have given Katrien a ride on the evening of her disappearance. Afterwards, 2 more letters follow in October and November. The letters are quite bizarre, with over-the-top language. The writer claims he dropped her off at the highway and that she didn't want to go home. In one of the letters, he says he's sorry he didn't bring her home against her wishes, and in another, he accuses her father of neglecting or even abusing her. He claims that she did call her parents from the bar, but that her father refused to come pick her up and that she should handle herself. He writes, "What kind of father leaves his teenage daughter alone in the Antwerp docks at night?" He continues that she was a very beautiful girl and that he visited her grave twice and will continue to do so once every week. He included many details about himself, stating he was a local male between 18 to 25 years old, with light hair and normal posture. Police investigated these letters but couldn't find a single suspect. In August 2006, a 35-year-old man from Kessel, identified as Carl Ferrar, who had been arrested for stalking, was charged with the kidnap and murder of de Kuyper. Police searching his house found child pornography on his computer and a box that contained newspaper clippings of articles about de Kuyper's disappearance and murder, and copies of the letters sent to Blick and to her parents in 1992. Furthermore, VRS DNA had been found on the stamp on the envelope of one of the letters. In March 2002, his brother had been sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend. He admitted that he wrote the letters but said that they were fabricated and that he only wrote them for publicity. In September 2006, de Kuyper's remains were exhumed for further tests. On 19th December 2006, VR was released from custody as the investigation had found no evidence against him other than the letters. In 2007, he was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment for possession of child pornography. This lead centers on the location where she was last seen, the bar from which she made her final phone call. The bar had a poor reputation, certainly not a spot where you would want your 15-year-old daughter wandering after dark. In the early 90s, the area around the port was known for its seedy bars and prostitution clubs. Why did she choose to go there? If she missed her bus, why didn't she head back to her boyfriend's house and then call her parents for a ride? Above the bar on the second floor was Studio X Kiss, a questionable photo studio used for adult shoots. This neighborhood also emerged in later investigations. In January 1994, Kim and Ken, a 12-year-old girl and her 9-year-old brother, went missing from the same street after playing with friends. 3 weeks later, Kim was found dead in the Asia Dock, a port area in Antwerp, just a few hundred meters from the bar. She had been stabbed and sexually assaulted. Her mother was not permitted to view the autopsy photos as they were considered too disturbing. Ken, her younger brother, was never seen again, and the case remains unsolved with no leads.